بحمد ربي أبدأ المنيرة ثم الصلاة والسلام السيرة على نبي اسمه محمد أبوه عبد الله منه مفرد
أبوه عبد الله منه مفرد.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Amma ba'd, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to lesson 2 of our seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sadly, I can't go into very much detail, but we'll touch on some important topics, inshallah, hoping to shed some light on important, significant elements and aspects of his life. Every part of his life was important, but these stand out in terms of our timeline, inshallah. So some important events that took place just prior to the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that Abdul Muttalib dug the well of Zamzam, right? So what we mean by dug the well of Zamzam is he prepared a formal, actual well, which wasn't really very structured at the time. And he then decided, you know what, so many people are coming for Hajj, they would look after the Hujjaj. Whatever the Hajj form was is irrelevant right now. We'll discuss that going forward, inshallah. But he kind of put a wall around it and made it more formal, you know, a more secure kind of a building. Another important element that happens shortly after that was Abraha. He was like the king of Yemen at the time, and he was upset about the fact that everybody goes to Makkah for Hajj, so he decided to build his own Kaaba in Yemen, and everybody must come for Hajj there. And some Bedouins from Makkah saw this happening, and they were like, what? How can we do something like this? This brother obviously doesn't know what's going on around him. And they then took the step to desecrate his Kaaba, or his building that he had now made for pilgrimage. And they actually desecrated it quite badly, smeared feces all over it and so on. And he then became violently upset, and he declared war on the Kaaba, the house of Allah. He marches with his army of elephants, which was something that they probably inherited from the Persian Empire, because they would wage war on elephants. And he marches on Makkah to destroy the Kaaba. And Abdul Muttalib meets them looking for his camels that had gone lost. And he meets with Abraha, and he says, I'm looking for my camels. So he's like, you can see we're here with an entire army to destroy the Kaaba. Aren't you scared? He said, listen, the camels are mine. I need to take responsibility. The house of Allah is his house, Allah's house. He will take responsibility. And that's how everything went pear-shaped for them, right? A number of morals and lessons that Sheikh Dr. Ali bin Muhammad S.A.W. points out. I can't go into those details. But those were the significant events just prior to the birth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, just before that, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is set to come into this dunya, and it's probably heralding the most significant occurrence in the history of mankind, if not the most significant occurrence in the history of mankind, with the advent of the final prophet. And there's a couple of things that we refer to as irhas. So irhas is miraculous events that take place just prior to the birth of a prophet, right? For instance, there was a fire burning in a temple in the Persian Empire that they would worship. It had been burning for 1,000 years, and on the night that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, miraculously that fire just went out, and absolutely nothing they could do could rekindle it, right? This is to show that falsehood is now on its way out and truth has come into the world. Also, some of the palace of Kisra had massive pillars. Those pillars started shaking, some of them cracked and broke, to show that your empire is now on its way out. There was also a great light that was seen coming from the east, went up into the sky. Now, I don't think along the lines of biblical story that also with Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, a star was seen and the wise men came and so on. But this has also been recorded in the hadith that a very bright light shone up into the sky from the Middle East, and this is what was seen. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birth itself was also extremely miraculous, in the sense that throughout the pregnancy, in fact, his mother didn't experience any difficulty. There was no real pain with in her contractions and in her labor itself. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, he was born completely washed and cleaned and circumcised, right? Then comes the normal Arab custom of letting your child go and suckle by a wet nurse instead of raising them in the urban setting in cities and towns, because they would get pure Arab language, and they would be taught pure Arab language and a clean, pure lifestyle. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam thus made his way to Halima Sa'diyah. She was a struggling woman, very, very poor. They came into Makkah to look for little children that they could breastfeed, and there was none. And eventually this little boy from a poor family, his father had passed away, he was an orphan, fearing that they wouldn't really get any money for it. Nobody wanted to really accept him or take him. And she then decided, you know what, let me look after this little child. And wallahi, the moment she brought him into her life, everything changed for her. The barakah that was seen was unprecedented. Her goats, suddenly the udders blew up. Everybody wanted to go and graze their goats where Halima's goats were grazing, even though the goats were grazing in the same place, and there was no more grass for them than anyone else. And so many other things, life just became peaceful and blessed for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with understanding how amazing our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. In fact, one of the reasons I accepted to do these lessons is I have a friend whose wife is literally a practicing Muslim, except for the fact that she hasn't accepted Islam. And when I asked her why, her words to me were that she's not convinced of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I was firstly hurt but shocked that somebody could not be convinced of Muhammad, and the only way we could remedy that is to explain who he really was. Right? Shortly after going to live with Halima Sa'diyah, his mother passes away as well. He's 6 years old. He then goes into the care of his grandfather, into the care of his grandfather, who then passes away shortly after that, and now he's in the care of his uncle Abu Talib. And Abu Talib, experienced businessman, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has now grown up. He's a young man. He's living with his uncle, and they decide they're going to go for a trip to Syria on business. And they meet this monk, Buhaira. So Buhaira was one of those monks who had learned pristine Christianity, like a lot of the books that are, in my opinion, locked up in the Vatican that nobody would be able to get hold of because of what they contain. He told, when he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sitting under that specific tree, it was like a prophecy that had come true. And he went up to them and he said to them that, listen here, take this boy back to wherever you've come from, because this is the final prophet. He couldn't understand what was going on. It didn't make sense to him at the time. And he was then protected. He went back to Makkah Mukarramah, and nothing really significant happened to him, but they were scared that if he gets to Damascus and Syria and the monks and the rabbis see him there, they might do something to him, because they would also recognize the fact that he's the final messenger, and that would be a threat to their dominance and to the kind of a hold that they have over the people, because they're the clergy. Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a very upright man in Makkah Mukarramah, also understand that there were many people at the time who started getting a bit of an awakening and realizing that things don't have to stay like this. This doesn't mean this has to be the be-all and end-all of life, and the way we're doing things is the only way to do it. And they started getting this awakening, and there were a number of young men around the same age as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that started this little group, shall we say, an NGO, if you will, called Hilf al-Fudul, an allegiance of upright young men, a youth movement in which they endeavored to look after the poor, look after the widows, do charity work, humanitarian aid, look after people. So he was a contributing person, and this is why later on, when he got the first revelation, which we will touch on in the following lessons, he was scared, because what just happened to me. And Khadija radiallahu anha said to him that, but you help the poor, and you look after the widows, and you feed the orphans, and you do these kind of good things. You're a contributing person. You're an upright man in society. Nothing bad could happen to you. Nobody could want bad for you, because of the significant impact he had in society. Now, a 25-year-old man approximately, Khadija radiallahu anha, being a very proficient businesswoman, she needs somebody to do business for her. And it was also in Syria, if I'm not mistaken, and she sends him, she employed him to go for her to Syria. And he comes back, and he had made a magnificent prophet. And she kind of was attracted to his good character, his morality, his uprightness, the fact that he was so true to his word. And obviously, understand also that the prophets don't get selected as prophets because they are like that. So, because that would mean that if I'm a really upright person, and I'm really honest, and I'm really hardworking, and I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beautifully, and I meditate and I reflect on the world and the meaning of life and so on and so forth. I'm a very deep spiritual type of a person. I could then potentially become a prophet. I could be selected as a prophet because I have these qualities. Prophets are created with those qualities because they are destined to become prophets. Do you understand? So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was created. In fact, with regards to Salih alayhi salam, كنت فينا مرجوا قبل هذا. You were somebody that we had hopes in before you came with this whole prophethood story of yours. Why? Why would they have had hopes in him? Because he had all those qualities, because he was destined to be a prophet. Much like this, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and all the other prophets. So eventually he married Khadija radiallahu anha, and it was a magnificent marriage. The happiest marriage of I think Arabia. Everybody envied them for how happy they were. And just to conclude today's lesson, there was a very significant incident that happened around the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he was in his early 30s probably. That the Quraysh decided they're going to rebuild the Kaaba, right? And they were only going to use halal money. So they knew when they were being naughty and when they were being nice. They knew when their money was tainted and when their money was clean. So they decided they're only going to use the clean money. And that's why the Kaaba is not, it used to be like a rectangle rounded on the side where the hatim is. It's now a square because that's how they built it, because they didn't have enough halal money to complete it, right? And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam left it as such with the hatim, just a small wall on the side. This is why when we try to read salah in the Kaaba, or we want to read salah in the hatim, it's considered as though you're in the Kaaba. So the big fight breaks out because who's going to put the last stone, the Hajar Aswad, into the Kaaba? And eventually they decide, they're sitting having a big argument about this in the Haram, and they say, okay, the next person who's going to walk in here, we will agree to whatever he says. This is an indication of the entire Arab world accepting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the final messenger. It's also a proof that they had absolutely nothing bad to say about him. They recognized him for his honesty and his position, his sound intellect, sound reason. So as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the person to walk in on this meeting, and the whole fight kind of comes to an end, and they look at him and they say, oh, this is the person we need. This is exactly the guy we need. And he says, bring a sheet. All the leaders take hold of the sheet, and we will then pick it up. And they picked it up and they went to the Kaaba, and Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam places the stone in the Kaaba, and everybody goes home happy. So this is going to now be the starting point of our next lesson, inshallah, which indicates why the people were willing to accept him as a prophet, or should have been at least. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us, in light of that friend of mine whose wife is holding back on Islam because she's not convinced of Muhammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala convince us of how significant and amazing this human being was, or is actually still in our lives. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
بحمد ربي أبدأ المنيرة ثم الصلاة والسلام السيرة على نبي اسمه محمد أبوه عبد الله منه مفرد.